We have learnt to cherish preliminary finals. That's the marker the whole way through. It's why PFI is probably our favourite category all year. David King.
Hello, G. 7th year. I think in the hospitality industry, that's long service. You're up for long service. Am I up for long service next year? I take the first 12 weeks.
we weren't disappointed, were we? In different ways. The first game wasn't great, but...
It wasn't great, but look...
So King's Gambit to start on how and why we cherish prelims.
Every club operates for this weekend just gone. Where are our flaws in the off-season? What do we need to address? What do we need to fix? Systems, different levels of talent, finding a pressure forward, finding Port Adelaide went shopping last year to find a ruckman. They got that guy. It was Jordan Sweet. He looked terrific during this last couple of weeks. So every decision you make in October is about this weekend to get when it really comes to crunch, when everything just is put head to head versus your opponent, what stands up. And I really feel for Port Adelaide and Ken Hinkley. And we've talked a little bit about this in the last few weeks, but they were disarmed with the loss of Farrell to a lesser extent, but Houston is a top liner in our comp. And the way they want to play operates with halfback flankers kicking the ball back into the corridor more than any other team. So to lose that guy, we really didn't go hard enough at suspensions in September. It's just they just kill seasons. They just ruin everything. Because you look at them all week and they're training perfectly, and then they sit in the stands on a Saturday, and it just kills you. And players at that level, I mean, it was a moment in time that ruined their year. But the other three, and I think the wording that Horney's used over the last few weeks is spot on, is you are what you are. And they were true to themselves under the biggest pressure of preliminary final. Now, that game on Saturday night was an absolute cracker. Could have gone either way. Players stepping up when the time was right, when the moment was theirs. The tactical changes in the game, the setups were all what we knew. We knew Zorko was going to play like that off halfback. Give a bit to get a bit. There'll be times where you go, what's he doing? He's costing him. There'll be times you go, how good's that from Zorko? Tom Stewart the same. And then just a heap of matchups. It becomes more matchup centric when you get to this stage of the year. So I think we just have to celebrate the weekend we've had. I feel for Port. That wasn't probably their best output, and the Swans, I felt they could have won by any margin in that game, really. But they were able to play their way, which is a scary sign coming into Saturday again. But that game on Saturday is the one we'll all be watching on replay.
The means test, thanks to Jamison Irish Whiskey, gather round. So that is the big issue, was what did we see on Saturday night? I feel like for history... It just needed Stanley to kick that goal so it was a one-kick margin, because in 20 years' time when people scan back through, they'll miss the 10-point margin. You'll have to have been there. You'll have to have absorbed it and have it live with you, because you might accidentally scan past it on a page. But it had everything that a preliminary final should have, including the very best of both teams. One in the second quarter, one in the third quarter.
Oh, even late in the last. I mean, I haven't heard your call or the SEN call as yet, and I'm sure it was as good as what it felt on radio, on TV. And everyone sees different things and calls them in different ways. But the iconic moments of prelims live large. And the Tom Stewart tackle won't be celebrated because he was in the losing team. It won't be celebrated like the Fraser Brown tackle, but it was exactly that, right? But it'll just dissipate. It'll go. Otherwise, you'd have the old who was our man who used to do the paintings, the team of the century paintings.
Oh, yes.
You'd have all of that. You'd have all of that done again about that moment. But then Rayner is the moment we'll talk about. The left footer from outside of 50 to just go bang. That is over. So it always gives you something. It always gives you a moment to celebrate. I think that'll be the one that lives large for me. That one step when you had to have it. Archie. Very similar, but I think the Rayner moment will be the one that lives long in the Lions fans' minds.
How did they do it?
Well, how did they do it? I think they did it with clearly a radical shift at halftime to lengthen the ground. Obviously, they had the injury in the ruck, so things had to shift there. But let's just talk about the ball movement. The ball movement was the way they won it. Now, you can argue, was it changing the angles or changing lanes, as they say, or was it coming through corridor? I tend to say coming through corridor because I think corridor kills, and whoever owns corridor generally wins unless you play an unbelievable kicking game. So they took away the interceptors of Geelong because they in the end turned and ran the ball at them and then picked their poison going forward of centre. So Stewart was an ever-present danger long down the line. Blitzards was there more often than not. The back lines looked in full control in that first half, and then they were able to counterpunch and bring the ball back, the Cats. But once they start coming through the corridor, there was space everywhere. And because they lengthened with that smaller forward line so quickly, there were big voids of space. Like you didn't see that in the first half. So it takes a lot of courage to do that. And the guys that kicked the ball into the corridor, I think it was Lester that started it.
It was.
His first kick back into the corridor, he went, hey, wow, that's something they can build on. And they got through pretty easily. And you thought, oh, that's a lot easier than it's been for the first sort of 20 minutes of the game. So in the end, it was their dare, and they were true to themselves. That's who the Lions have tried to be all year. Whether you don't always get it, but that's what they've tried to be all year. High uncontested mark, probe, till something opens up into the corridor and take it. They were a bit longer kicks than what we're used to for Brisbane back into the corridor. They were more than 45, 50-metre sort of kicks, but they just kept their vision and their mindset in a really aggressive corridor fashion.
One of the biggest questions that sat over Brisbane in the funk in the early part of the season was their next wave. Did they have the next wave once they got those early injuries? And the full fruition of their next wave was in front of us in a preliminary final. So Will Ashcroft, Jasper Fletcher, Kai Lohman, Logan Morris, Darcy Wilmot. So they're 5 young players who are their next wave, and they all played profound roles.
Yeah, I've talked about Darcy Wilmot a lot. I think he's a star in the making, and I think he'll end up getting opportunity in the midfield. I think he's a Hayden Young type player. There's something different about Darcy Wilmot, the person and the player. The guys that they can be a goldfish. They can get over a mistake really quick, and they can just live in the next opportunity and not be concerned about or stressed by the game. I think that sort of players, you need those sort of guys, particularly if they're high-end talent like Darcy. He was unreal on the weekend. He was bulletproof. It's interesting that you talk about this because we've seen premierships won as a result of accidents. Like, Lohman gets thrown in because Link McCarthy's done a knee. And then you've got Morris who comes in, he's half a hamburger on the way to the game or whatever, because they just need him. So Gardner goes down, Morris comes in because they want to still play that third tall. And they just grab it. And sometimes we overestimate how hard the game is for the young players, and they have been terrific. And then Ashcroft, I mean, he sees the game a little bit like the absolute pointy-end top liners do. He sees it in advance. He's seen the movie. He's read the book. That handball from Duncan, who's an incredibly experienced player, who would have shot that handball lateral at centre bounce clearance 200 times in his career. And Ashcroft says, "I know where this is going. I know you want to be aggressive, and I'm going to cut it off." So they had a big say in the weekend, and the way they're playing, you'd think they'd have a big say again next week.
What about Logan's just the sheer audaciousness of youth? I'm flying for this. And the only thing he didn't do was kick what would have been the sealer after he'd taken his hanger 20 metres out from goal.
Unreal.
That's the fearlessness of youth.
They do bring an enthusiasm and a bubble to your group. So sometimes you can, we talk about teams being old, and you can get old and tired and everything's a bit hard. And, we've got to train, we've got to do this, we've got another meeting, we've got this. And these young guys just come in and they're excited to do anything. Anything that's up for, what are we doing? We've got a meeting, beauty, let's go, So I think that has affected their group. And every time they speak, they mention those guys with a bit of bubble. Who's the weirdest guy at the club? Oh, no, Lohman, definitely, And they talk about Wilmot the same. So, no, they've had a massive impact. And I've heard Fague say they keep him young and keep things on edge. But in the end, it does come down to your quality. And the quality at the end just did things that other players can't do.
So Lockie Neal's third quarter, Harris Andrews with his intercept marking. So their best players came to the fore as well as everything else that was going on.
And Leicester was able to do a job on Jeremy Cameron. I mean, this guy's been around a long time and would be largely unrecognised as an AFL player. If he walked down the middle of Burke Street this Friday afternoon without his Brisbane gear on, I don't think too many people would stop him.
Yep.
But he's able to stop one of the game's best players for 110 of the 120 minutes, which set them a long way down the path of winning this game.
Yep. And Neil, so he's playing hurt. He won't be the only one at this time of year, but it was graphically before us last week, and his third quarter when he just intervened. So that becomes a big part of a player's legacy, I think.
Well, the centre bounce clearances are at a premium, aren't they? When you're trying to take the pressure off your back six, particularly when you've got some youngsters down there, or the opposition clearly at this stage of the year have got enormous talent forward of the ball. So you want to just give them as minimal opportunities as you can. So he wins 4 centre bounce clearances in the third quarter, Lockie. And I think that's probably outside of that. I'm not sure if he was at his best on the outside and as damaging as he's ever been. I don't think that's his best game by a long way. But his clearance game is so strong, and he actually stepped through when you thought they're swimming against the tide there for a while. He steps through and gets those pure clearances. Didn't necessarily score from them, but they got good territory, and that's half the battle of taking the pressure off your back six. If you score, terrific, but you're not conceding. And you challenge the opposition to go full length of the ground to then beat you. That's a tough way to live. So, Lockie's, we all celebrate Lockie. We love Lockie, and he's so good to us in the media and taking us on the journey and letting us into what was said and what is being said around the club at each particular time. And 2-time Brownlow medalist, we know what he is as a player. But no, I think he's been able to take us with him, particularly this year. Now he's a very mature guy. And see him on 360 with you guys regularly. He lifts the curtain a little bit for us.
So a bit of the evolution of the Lions through this season. We've watched that. We've commented on it. They've grappled with trying to be better at teamsmanship, trying to be better with each other, and that's been part of their journey this year.
So we probably say they're selfish play, and they probably say, we can be better for each other. So there's two different. The wordings are so different, but they're talking basically about the same thing.
Give me the curiosity of Dane Zorko.
Well, he just was getting so much ball early. 10 and 11 touches in the first quarter, and you're thinking, okay, if this keeps going, he'll put Brisbane on the path to winning. But the strategic battle, which come to bear in terms of the scoreboard cost in the second quarter, those half forwards playing up high at stoppage and not always charging through, sometimes holding in space and getting used and creating that leapfrog effect, or even be there to tackle at times, was pretty big. And it was significant on the scoreboard because they were able to get through the Cats and really hurt them. 5 goals from stoppage in that second quarter alone. And that's because of, and we talked last Wednesday night, what are you going to do here to Chris Fake? How are you going to handle this? How are you going to cope with this? So at halftime, you're thinking, is this going to keep going? Like, how are you going to address that? And then that's why you talk about Lockie Neal's 6 clearance quarter, is because you don't have that problem if they don't win the ball. So there's so many different ways, and some people say, the worth of what's the worth of a clearance? We regularly talk about, would you rather win the turnover or the clearance? If you're winning the ball, all of that strategic stuff in terms of what they're doing with their half forwards doesn't come into the game. But does it make you change your method with Zorko? Or does John Longmire this week say, you know what, I don't care what Zorko, we're tagging him. James Jordan, he's yours. I just don't want to get beaten by Zorko. So I think that's one of the fascinations going forward this week.
PFI, Sydney had it. Sydney had it in abundance. So how close to the perfect preparation is that for the Swans as they come back to a grand final?
Well, nothing's perfect, but in terms of the way they use the ball and the plan, they went into this game. So they played Port Adelaide in round 21 and they took all sorts of risks with the footy and were doing what the Swans do and biting off corridor, and they just got picked apart. And they got out-coached that day with Ken Hinkley guarding 10 metres inside, every player 10 metres inside their opponent to gum up the corridor and give them wide, force them wide. The Swans said, okay, they're going to come with that same plan. Let's take the wide. Let's just take the wide and then see what happens then and get to 70 from goal, 80 from goal and see if they still stay wide. And if they stay wide, just keep hitting those targets that are available. So in the first half, they smashed them. It took something like 60-odd marks in a half of footy. And they worked the ball down the ground methodically and got good looks. Their forward line hasn't looked as good as that all year. because it was all one-on-one, because you're working it slowly and methodically down the ground. Everyone has to stay referenced to a man, and Amadi got looks, and when Heedy got forward, he got good looks, and what they didn't mark, it was never a problem for them. So it was a mismatch, really. Because, again, I say Ken's been disarmed severely without those two halfback flankers and Marshall. Now, I'm not giving him an out. That's the reality. It's not an excuse. It's a reason. But the tactical side of it, or the planning, John Longmire had 2 weeks to set this up, and he did it perfectly. So I think they will look at the clearance game. So at halftime, so I did some numbers on this. Just at halftime was a real problem. 25 clearances to 10 in favour of Port Adelaide, 10-3 out of the middle. If that happens this Saturday, the game will be over. There's more talent in the Brisbane forward 50 or forward half than there is in Port Adelaide's. And probably, I would say, a better system. They don't just bomb the ball in. They scan and they find targets. So the Swans are aware of this. They know this. So this is why the loss of McInerney is so huge. McInerney brained Grundy last time they played each other. Smashed him. Too big, too much craft in terms of the absolute ruck work, and he set them on the path. So of all the outs that give Sydney a real opportunity to take control in the middle, this is Grundy's time to be the man they've invested in, the absolute perfect off-season recruit. You're going to get a better opportunity against a guy who's been stuck in the VFL since round 7, Darcy Ford. And we like Darcy, but let's be honest, he hasn't. He's been a tweener, elite at the VFL level and not quite there at AFL level, stuck in between. So can he just say, this is the status that I'm an All-Australian AFL ruckman, top liner. They need to see that this week. If those numbers are reflected again this week, Brisbane will smash them. So I think it's, when you look at the talent in there, we keep talking about Warner and Rowbottom and Heaney and Goulden, those guys at ground level in there. If they get first service, that's their biggest opportunity.
Heaney's overall game again, so he's played 2 grade finals.
Yeah, look, we've talked a lot about his status in the game since he's gone in and played midfield again. Things happen by accident. The injury to Callum Mills in the preseason of last year on Mad Monday last year has forced John Longmire's hand a little bit. Sheldrick, who's the kid they wanted, the first-round pick they wanted to play in the middle this year, at the start of the year was injured for that first 6 to 8 weeks. I think he had a foot injury. So they had to manufacture, and what a boom it's been. The thing that they are doing with Heaney, he's that corridor runner, and he always finishes his runs inside the forward 50. Now, we know he's been a pseudo centre-half forward for 6, 7 years, maybe longer. So he understands forward craft better than he. So as soon as they have a midfielder type with him or an undersized player, they are now just kicking the ball to him. So it's hard for McLean and Amadi and all these guys to light up because they're trying to keep the game in the hands of the stars. But Heaney did it again. He's a beautiful mover. He's probably the most elegant-looking player in the game at the moment and in pure health. And resting him late in the season for round 24 with one aim, I think it sent a big message to this group. It's not about the Brownlow. It's about winning the premiership. I just think that they've been there before. I heard Chad Warner talk after the game to us on Fox, and he said, we know what the difference between a prelim and a grand final is. The ferocity and the intensity, it just ramps up. And we got smacked in 2022. We were taught a lesson on what the gap between what we thought we could bring and get away with or be competitive with, as opposed to what Geelong did. In that first half against Geelong, it was 6-4-40 to 2 points from clearance. And he's talking about Dangerfield and the way he started that game. And he just ripped them. Now, I know they're 2 years older and a little bit more experienced and a different midfield mix, but I get the sense that they have been ready for this, to get another opportunity to come back and say, we are better than we showed you last time. And this midfield, I think, is ready to step up.
It's a rich motivator, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And how do you see it?
That mindset will be there, is having disappointed so significantly 2 years ago, and then you earn your chance back there.
So McInerney out. What do you think of Joe Daniher in the ruck?
it worked, didn't it?
Yeah.
For what they needed. It denies them a bit up front because Daniher was so good in last year's grand final. So you definitely bring Fort in, but I like the way you're thinking about. So Fort for X amount of time, and then Daniher can do the rest of it, and you can get a different look up front.
Yeah, I always thought they're probably a bit tall forward of centre when they've got those guys that can mark so well above head in Bailey and Rayner and Charlie Cameron still. That mix after half time when they were a bit smaller forward of the ball lengthened really, really quickly and created those voids of space further up the field for the midfielders to work into. So I hope Joe does a fair bit of ruck in the second half of this week's grand final. Yeah, sub Darcy out, start of third quarter, get through to that point so you can take a bit of a risk. And if someone else gets injured, it's only for 30, 40 minutes of footy, not the full 120. But now Joe was very good. I think they outscored the opposition 4 goals to 0 when Joe went in the ruck from clearance. So that's a big win. I know he does things differently, and he can be a bit of a blaster with the footy, but I think the aggressive Joe in the ruck is still a pretty good product.
The curiosity for Sydney is how they handle the week, just with the players who are either on the fringe or injured, the management within the team, and then the external as well. So here was Taylor Adams and Callum Mills with Romain Bryan on 7. Because it's their captain. It's not a mid-range player. It's not a young player. It's their captain.
Yeah. Well, there's no easy way. I mean, you've got to give that player the chance to earn the right to play, and then you make the decision. That's why you're the coach. That's why you're in this position to set this team up this week to win the flag the best possible way you can. I think it hurts the captain, the fact that John Longmire's 1-3 in grand finals. If he's 3-1, you can choose your own path without any feedback, really. And having had the Sam Reid issue last time, I don't think helps either. So they would have made these exact decisions last time and favoured, we'll trust the player, and it didn't work. So I think all of that comes into it. In the end, John Longmire will make the best decision for this football club to win the flag. It's not about individuals. It's about the team, the squad, the club. And that's his duty. So I doubt that he plays, because I think the Max Holmes discussion with Chris Scott is the benchmark. Even if you are declared right to play, if it's just not absolutely 100%, 95 is not good enough. You have to be 100, because we got Robbie Fox there ready to come on and maybe clamp a Rayner, or maybe clamp a Bailey. Don't know what the role specifically would be. And then the Taylor Adams, there's no shame in being Taylor Adams. If you're the 24th, 25th best player on this list, given the run they've had, and he's been that player before, or he was injured, albeit he was injured last time, well, so be it. He's still a pretty good player, isn't he? Like, I just don't want the negativity to creep in with Taylor, because he's just a bit unlucky. He's just not in great form at a time when it became really critical, when the pressure was on for spots and Parker just put his nose in front at the right time, and he's found it hard to get back in the squad.
Yeah, it's the heartache in it that I think we're gravitating towards. I haven't heard anybody make the case that he should be in the team. And the moments that he had to grasp it. And the scenario is so interesting. Is he was a great pickup for the Swans over the summer, but by the time he was ready to play, they actually didn't need him anymore, because they'd changed their midfield mix in the way that you had described, and then he just wasn't quite able to nail it down. And so that's, do you stay there and be on the periphery? Do you get somewhere where you're going to play? Those are questions for beyond this, but it is that's going to be the heartache. Just with Mills, would you if it was your team, would you let it run the course of the week, or would you look to short circuit it early because it's the captain and just settle the team to settle everybody before you travelled?
I think everyone knows the situation. They probably talk to the player more than the coach. So you don't need to get ahead of yourselves. Just prepare your individual game the best you can, and we'll worry about Callum Mills. And if he gets through session 1, we'll go to session 2. And if he gets through session 2, we may have to do a fitness test on top of that, or there may be some extras done. And then they'll make a decision. And I'd imagine it'd be a sit-down elongated chat. It wouldn't be an easy conversation to have, and they'll make that call. Now, if it's a tick, the group will get a bit of a rise and a lift out of that, and if it's a cross, they'll handle it accordingly. Mature, I don't think you'll know till Thursday.
So how Friday night panned out, the bigger picture and the what comes next for Port. What's central in your thinking here, Kingy?
Oh, well, they need a fair bit of change, and evolution. Not necessarily all bad or all good. I like some of what they do, and some of what they do revolves around the key three in the middle, which is very similar to Sydney, and they maybe need a couple more years to grow together and embed Jason Horne-Francis into that midfield for a bit longer and, build his fitness and see if he can get more midfield minutes out of Jason. And then he becomes the man in there. And he's not far off it because he's the one that looks like separating that game all the time. I think behind the ball, there's been patches this year where they've been really good and there have been patches where they're really gettable. That's like most defensive sixes or back sixes. But forward of the ball is probably their biggest concern, and just the simplicity in which they play. Like, they take all the risks bringing the ball out of the back line. They'll fire the ball into the corridor to a 30% target regularly, and they'll bite off the unbelievable, and you go, fantastic. And they take one step forward of centre, and they'll kick the highest of high balls to a spot that's 15 metres out from goal, and there'll be 8v8 jumping for the ball. It's like markers up in the schoolyard.
Yes.
But that can't pay the bills consistently enough in big games. I think they've got players that in the end don't bother leading because they know they're not going to get it. They just track back to the drop of ball. Now, that's so basic, it's not going to work. The best they've looked at this year was when Georgio's on the fly, on the lead, boom, they hit up the target. Or Horne-Francis goes forward and they hit him up on the lead. I still think Rosie's a question mark as a pure mid for me. I think he's more of a swooping half forward flanker that can spend time rolling up to stoppage, but I think fundamentally he's a half forward that kicks goals. I just don't know if he's a gun midfielder in our comp, and he's a very good player, but I just think he's more of a centre forward player than a pure mid. So I still think there's some things to learn about this group. But in the end, Ken got him to work. It's a little bit like the Chris Scott discussion. What have you done with what you've got? He's done a pretty good job with what he's got at hand.
Finishing second and making a prelim. Once you looked at the warts of it, you go, this is a phenomenal job to be here.
Yeah. But this is his list.
Because
he's created this. Their acquisitions are done by their committee, which he would be the major say in.
And now so Charlie Dixon is surely retiring. I think Travis Spoke was going to go on, but I don't see that now. So that's a discussion for them. And what's the next evolution of their list? So they've got Todd Marshall, who now has long-term concussion issues. Ollie Lord needs to come through and be a forward for them. The lack of depth, Houston leaving, maybe an early draft pick. They just I don't think they have a contending list coming into next year.
Yeah, so what does that tell you? What's the next step from there then?
So this is where it gets really interesting, particularly when you've got a coach who's in the last year of his contract going in. It feels a bit like the Leon Cameron scenario with the Giants.
So meaning what?
He came into a year where they weren't going to be successful. They'd set it up that they weren't going to be successful, that they were sort of resetting, but the coach was in the last year of his contract. So that's out of whack.
So the end point of that is what?
I think you're sitting down having a conversation. What is our trajectory here? If this is a 1-year project, then let's do the 1-year project. If it's not a 1-year project, we have to actually figure out what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, you can't have the long goodbye. You can't say this is my last year of coaching. You just can't do that. That's not going to have any success attached to it. Whether it be development success, which is probably what you're talking about, or making finals and charging towards another opportunity.
So it doesn't work to say this is the last year and Josh Carr, this is the final year of our handover?
No. If you've made that decision, cut the cord, rip the Band-Aid off and go. And I think everyone's mature enough to handle that. Otherwise, you just create more pain. The long goodbye doesn't serve any purpose or bring any benefit to anyone, the club nor the coach, nor the players. So make your decisions, make your call, and get on with it. That's why you're in these positions, to make these calls. Ken's done an amazing job this year, but they've had sort of two eras now. 5-6 years is probably an era. You've got to capitalise and win one with that group, and then it evolves into another group, and then you make a decision. Do you want to give him the third wave opportunity at it? Now, if they do, fine, but they've got to go backwards to go forwards. To me, they keep picking up a lot of C grade / B grade talent that they think is going to become A grade talent. Well, most of us sit back and go, well, you know what? Jordan Sweet finished the year really strong, but he's still Jordan Sweet. Now, Radagalier is still Radagalier. Now, you can say he's going to be a good centre-half back for us, but we all sort of know that he's got he's got limitations, you know, and he hit them pretty early, and you didn't like him, so then you threw him forward. So you got what you sort of expected to get in the finals. So if it doesn't have preliminary final integrity, this is why you run aground. So I think Port set a lot of things up to win a lot of games that never has the ability to win a prelim. So what are you doing? So this is why I'm a little bit critical on Port, but trying to not make it all about Ken, because they are full club decisions. Ken doesn't walk in and say, get me those 4 players, and they go and get them. But, you know, without Horne-Francis, right, if they didn't have Horne-Francis there, you'd look at this list and you go, wow, where is this going? And they've had the luxury of getting him, and they've done a great job, and had to give up a little bit to get him. I understand all that. But to me, he's the only one that meaningfully is going to change this football club in the next few years. So they need to find a way to get back in at the start of the draft. So Houston maybe is that chance, and stop picking up the B and C graders. Start hunting a bit higher, or step back, reset, go again.
I think these are big days for them to, we always say, know where you are. They've got to make a searingly accurate assessment of what their possibilities are next
Do you think
year.
he'll coach round 1 2025?
No, I don't know the answer to that.
I know you don't know the answer. I
just leave that open until they have these proper discussions. There's no point him coaching round 1 next year if that's their reset year. So are they in it? Are they contending? Can they win it? If the answer to that is no, then there's actually no point going into that year.
There's not one person. Even Ken wouldn't think that they're there to win it with this group right now.
So that's for them as we make our assessments from the outside, but that's where we've always believed you've got to know where you are and you've got to be absolutely accurate in that assessment. They didn't look to me like a team at the end of Friday night that was winning next year's flag.
No, but it was without a couple of key components.
Yep.
So I'll just give them that small out that they were disarmed with the September suspension and the injury to Farrell and Marshall.
The last of our preliminary final questions. It's an open question of Geelong. There are a few bits and pieces to this. So that's a third preliminary final loss from 20 points or more up. Richmond, Hawthorn, and now the Brisbane Lions. The elongated homes phase where they were a man down for 20 odd minutes and where the sub might have been made. And then the overall of what they are able to do through this season with that team to be 2 minutes and 42 seconds away from a grand final.
I look at this squad and I say, wow, with 3 minutes to go, you're in a grand final. And I think you just have to say, well done to the full club, the whole club. And people say I over-index the responsibility and the credit to Chris Scott, but that's where it starts. If we're going to be critical of coaches, we've got to be positive with them as well. Outstanding job, and just run aground. And that, I think the Holmes discussion's a good one, because there's probably 4 players at Geelong that swing the game more than any other, and he's one of those. So you're taking as long as you need to take. If you think there's still a possibility of this being a positive response that he can go back on the ground and impact this game in a meaningful way, hey, take your time. Because I'd rather have him for the last 40 minutes of the game than you make a quick call, in hindsight, get it wrong. So he comes back out, half trots, didn't even break a tackle, he sort of still was tackled, and says, no, I'm not right to go. I don't know what else people wanted to happen there. It normally takes, 6-7 minutes anyway. So did it take an extra 10? Probably. But I'm gambling that 10 minutes to have him for the last 40. You agree?
Yep.
The game did slip, though, in that 17 minutes.
It did.
Yeah. And without Holmes, they looked pedestrian. And Dangerfield wasn't himself. He wasn't his powerful self in that last sort of 40 to 50 minutes. And Duncan come on and he didn't really give them the juice that you probably expected from the sub. So, no, he's a major player. You're taking as much time as needed for the correct assessment, just in case it's the positive one.
What about some of the stuff that Myers did?
Oh, I was staggered when I looked at the score sheet. He only had 5 score involvements. I thought every time he touched it, they looked like scoring.
Yes.
Some of the stuff that he did was really good. I heard Kane this morning talking about Tyson Stengel, and I agree with that. If you prepare in a random fashion, you get random results. You can't be really good one week, really poor the next in terms of your prep, and then expect to go through the final series 8 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 8 out of 10. Doesn't happen that way. So there's some home truths to be told there. And the simple way to look at it is they got some ageing stars, and if they are still looking to win that flag, and no one expected them to win this one. They really didn't. So it was an amazing effort, but they tick another year older, guys like Cameron and Dangerfield and Blitzarves, and they lose a couple in Hawkins and Tui. So they're starting to stack up now, those that are sort of falling off the other side. So it's going to get harder, but they got an unbelievable ability to bounce, Jared. Bailey Smith comes on board. There'll be a Smoky there somewhere. People still tell me, is the Oliver thing absolutely done? Could he end up at Geelong? I mean, I don't know. They'll have multiple irons in the fire, and we'll just wait and see who they can acquire.
What did you think of Tom Stewart's game?
Well, I thought he was second best on ground. I thought Leicester against Cameron was best on ground, and I thought that everyone had moments. There were a lot of moments players and a lot of great quarters and great halves, but across the course of the game, I thought Stewart was amazing, and Chris's coaching was interesting, wasn't it? Oh, do we tag him? Do we go after him? And in the end, the system got around Stewart in a way. So they, when they went smaller in that second half, went through corridor, wasn't as easy to intercept for Tom, but he did some unbelievable things. He patrolled that halfback flank area with aplomb. So he's an incredible player, and it just shows you what they. The line ball call, is he going to be right for the prelim? Is he going to be okay? Is he healthy? All that sort of stuff. Unreal. So he was terrific, but in the end, it was the style of play that negated his influence.
So people are desperate to call it a choke. So was it a choke?
No, I don't think it's a choke. That was just a great game of footy, wasn't it? I mean, you have Archie crumb a ball, snap it from 45 and go bang, and you go, oh, that's clever. That's amazing. And then Rayner do what he did, kick the goal, and you think, gee, that's pretty good too. They're the goals that separate the game. And Myers doing what he was doing at the other end. I just think you have to appreciate the game. No one. I didn't think anyone choked. Did you think they choked?
No.
It's a bit strong.
They hit the front with 2:42 to go.
Yeah, hit the front with 2:42 to go, and look, it was. The rundown tackler, Stuart, I know we've mentioned it a couple of times, but this game just had iconic moments that had Geelong won, we would have celebrated heavily. But we flip it because Brisbane won, and we'll talk about the Rayner goal. But so many things to like, and the guys that got thrown into different roles handled them really well. I thought their back six was terrific. Wilmot, Leicester, Starcevic is a player that people don't talk enough about. Thought he was terrific. There were just battles everywhere. Just embrace the game.
The best of preliminary finals.
Absolutely.
Rich storylines here. Nick Dacos in his third year to win his first Brownlow Chris Judd style, a second for Patrick Cripps, a third for Lockie Neal, or the crowning moment for Marcus Bontempelli, or something completely unforeseen. So a bit of a play here before we get to the multis.
I like when you throw the completely unforeseen in because you haven't seen it.
That's right. So Nick Dacos, Patrick Cripps.
Yeah.
So I've got 7 different counts that I've used to analyse it all this year. The spread on Dacos is narrower than the spread on Cripps. Is 30 to 33 is about the span for Dacos, and I reckon you put the Brownlow inflation on that, and he'll go a little bit further. The spread on Cripps I was surprised by. It's between 26 and 36. Wow. 26 would be a very low number, and 36 he'll win the medal. So how that looks, and then Neil maxes out on these counts at in the high 20s. Heaney maxes out at 29. Bontempelli maxes out at 26, 27. Sarong maxes out at 25. So while I do think there's a chance we could have 3 or 4 players in the 30s, across these 7 counts, there's only 2 players who get into the 30s.
I agree. And I think we're going to end up talking about this last game, the Collingwood last game, where the team fattened the books for Nick when he gets the 3 votes. I just feel like it's going to be a discussion tomorrow, Gerard.
So I think Dacos will win a Brownlow tonight.
Do you?
I think there's every chance he ties with Cripps. But I think, so Nick's my lock. Nick will win a Brownlow. It's just whether he wins the only Brownlow.
You got to back him every year. I'm going to back him every year for the next 10 years. And if he wins 2, you win money.
All right. So the spirit. So first we need to just reset our platform. In case you haven't followed the Brownlow Multi through the years, haven't got it once. All right?
For all different reasons.
Yeah, for all different reasons. But last year's reason was totally foreseeable.
What price was it? It was a big price too.
Yeah.
It was like $20 or $17.
It was good fun.
You haven't done
but
that
we
this
were
year,
out
yet?
the whole way through. As Cripps was polling early, Kerno was never a chance to beat him. And the year before, you'll remember that Carl Amon, who was projected to poll 0 votes, beat Ollie Wines with 20-something.
Now, the over-under I'm looking at today, or tonight, is what round do you text me and say, oh, no, this is going pear-shaped.
We're out.
Last year it was about round 3.
That was. The spirit of it is down in Mooroolbark. So this is the spirit of it. I want to be clear on that. Yeah. I've got $10 in my account, Gerard.
Beautiful.
Take me for the ride.
Love it.
That's the spirit of it.
Yes.
$10 to make tonight durable. The club by club's disappointing this year. There's just so many that are $1.04, $1.05, $1.15. It's actually hard to get it to work to anything. So we've got 10 certainties. You've labelled them something, haven't you?
The G10.
The G10.
Yeah, the G10.
Here's the G10. This is boring, right? This only gets to 339.
You sure you want to make it 10?
No, I'm not stopping
Sounds
at
like
10.
a lot.
We're going more than 10.
Okay, sorry.
The G10 is Dawson at Adelaide, Neil at Brisbane, Sarong at Fremantle, Jeremy Cameron at Geelong, Tom Green at the Giants, Jai Newcombe at Hawthorn, Max Gawn at Melbourne, Isaac Heaney at Sydney, Marcus Bontempelli at the Bulldogs, Elliot Yeo at West Coast.
West Coast. You've thrown Elliot Yeo in there.
$3.39. That's as far as I can get it.
$3.39
for 10. See the disappointment in that?
Very.
Yeah. So that's not it.
If you don't get that at $3.39, it's going to be incredibly disappointing.
That's just too low.
Yeah,
that's not for Dan. Doesn't want to ride tonight for $33. What a waste of time.
Yeah, how I question the quiz every Friday. Yes. This is on a knife edge if the $3.39 doesn't get up.
So then you've got to go to 11. You put Davies Uniac to beat Sheasel.
Yeah, like
Are you okay with that?
I love that.
All right. So that gets us to 644.
That'll do us.
That's the recommended, right? But if you're really in it for fun, and I'm in it for fun, I think Horn Francis will beat Butters. And Horn Francis is $5.
See, sometimes I have to pull you up, right? Old mate here's got $10.
Yep.
I don't want him to get involved in the Horn Francis v Butters thing.
Okay.
That's like who's your favourite child sort of Brownlow night stuff. No.
So Dan, cut it off at 11.
Exactly.
But I'm going 12. I'm putting Horn Francis in. I think he's the best fun tonight. I'm not saying he's the best bet, but he's the best fun at $5. And that gets my 12-leg multi to 32.22.
32?
Yep.
He's never been fun for Kanga supporters, Gerard, I can tell you. You won't get any love there. I found a different way.
Okay.
Can you come with me on that?
100%.
Because I think this is much easier to do than yours. So if you think the two at the front are going to charge into the 30s, well, why don't we back them? Patrick Cripps for the over and unders. That's the market that I like. So Patrick Cripps is over 32.5. Nick Dacos over 31.5. Into Tom Green. I don't think he'll poll as heavily as some think. Under 21.5. Jai Newcombe over 17.5. I think he'll get close to 20, 21. And Errol Gordon, I think, get a lot of 2 votes, over 22.5. So those 5 are 18.40.
That's $16.88.
What do you mean?
That's the price.
$16.88. Who are you shopping with? We need to talk. That's bad. You're getting bad numbers, man. Well, call it $16. It doesn't matter. I'll make with $10 is make a decision. Is he going with you or is he going with me?
All right.
That's what I want to know.
So here are the questions for tonight. Can you get Marshall beaten as the ruckman at St Kilda?
Oh, you can get Ruckman beaten all the time.
He's a white-hot favourite.
Who's second? Who's behind him?
Sinclair and Steele.
Sinclair for sure.
All right, that's $6. Rowell to beat Anderson, $5 versus $1.15. Can that happen? Sheasel versus Davies Uniacke, both $1.90. There's fun.
LDU.
Can you solve Richmond? I can't solve Richmond. Could Hogan beat Tom Green, $13 versus $1.04?
If he does, you know what happens there. The G10 goes under immediately.
It does, it sinks.
I got my fingers crossed that Hogan doesn't bowl early.
The one unanswerable is it possible Heaney won't get all of his votes after he gets suspended? And could Goulden beat him in the club by club?
Well, I think Errol will get a lot of votes. He's the smoky for me to finish inside the top 3.
Yep. And then the most fun is Horn Francis to beat Butters, so take the...
Could Sarong just get the lion's share of any votes available in Fremantle?
Yep. So
and stack threes?
I can get him to 25,
Can you get
21,
him to 30?
23, 21, 22, 25. No, I can only max him out at 25.
But he polls in like 13 games, isn't
Yeah. Yep.
he? If he's the Lockie Neal of Freo, I can see him going real deep.
All right. So Kingy's got the over-unders,
G10.
5-legger for good fun. The G10, which is boring, add Davies Uniacke. But if you really want the full experience,
no.
I'm adding Horn
The
Francis.
G12.
We'll see where we go. Kingy, terrific.
Good on you, mate.
Good fun.
Can't wait for this weekend, and we'll do our big breakdown next weekend and celebrate the Premier.
Yeah. We say gamble responsibly, but don't gamble at all. That's really just poke fun. Just poke fun at us.
Yeah.